Well, the most dangerous thing has happened. All of the parents are out of the room, and I am running this show by myself. I have been waiting for this opportunity, frankly, to be able to run this show alone, for you all to finally see the power that I am. And just kidding. My friends, my beautiful friends, are out doing life, which has a way of catching up with us from time to time. So you just get me tonight, but we're so glad that you're here. I have no ability to replicate Jeff's intro, but we are Dentists in the Know. We welcome you to our live program here on this Wednesday night. It is our Hump Day happy hour where we bring you news, politics, the latest dental trends, all from our observation seat as dental practice owners and operators, as small business owners, and just doing life in the trenches in the world of dentistry. I am Dr. Jennifer Bell. I am so glad that you are joining us this evening. We've had some really big news happening in the world of Dentists in the Know. Today, we launched our first announcement for a live webinar. We're going to be bringing back one of our guests that we've had just recently, Dr. Joy. She's going to come back on and talk about all things elderly care and preventative dentistry, focusing on fluoride and SDF, thrush. We talked about so many wonderful topics that evening. And honestly, this is a webinar not just for dentists, it's really for anyone who's providing care to their elderly parents or family members and having to sort of co-supervise their overall oral care with facilities or managed care facilities that they find their loved ones in. Like, you can be an advocate for them if you know the right questions to ask. And then from a dental perspective, how cool is it that we could participate in that type of care? It's been an ongoing frustration for myself in my dental practice when we have to bring individuals in from their managed facilities to get them the care that they need. I wish there was an easier way for us just to go to them directly and provide a level of care that would have value and benefit for them. So I think this is going to be a fantastic webinar. If you're interested in joining us, we have all that information in our private Facebook group, as well as our link tree on our Instagram page, Dentists in the Know. So please go check it out. We would love to see you there. And did I mention it's free of charge? Thanks to our friends at Kettenbach Dental. So we're able to bring that education to you at no cost, which is pretty amazing in the world of tariffs. Okay. This is coming to you free. All right. So lots of interesting things have been happening in the world of news. We're going to go ahead and dive in because I don't have anyone to introduce me into news anyway. So we might as well talk about all the things that are happening. First off, Florida is looks like going to be the second state to officially ban their fluoride distribution in the municipal water system. As you know, Utah was the first to come online with banning fluoride distribution. And now we're seeing Florida step it up. It's passed their House. I think it has to work through their Senate and then ultimately end up on DeSantis's desk. So we shall see how this goes, but it certainly seems to have a fair amount of momentum. Now, there are quite a few other states that are also looking at it and municipalities throughout the U.S. So this is probably going to be an ongoing news topic that we'll be bringing to you pretty routinely. Another interesting opportunity for those of us who have stayed fairly engaged over the last 20 years of dentistry, you know that there are a lot of regulatory items out there on the docket that prohibit us from doing many things that you might be able to do in any other industry. For instance, we're not allowed as dentists to talk to other dentists about what they charge for their procedures. There is a law that prohibits us from being able to have open dialogue about that. Well, this might be our opportunity, everyone. The Anti-Competitive Regulations Task Force, brought to you by the Department of Justice, as well as the Reducing Anti-Competitive Barriers from the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, both with a looming deadline of May 26th of 2025, are looking for your comment. So it could be anything that you perceive to be a restriction, regulatory issue that's locking you up and not allowing you to really achieve your full potential as a healthcare agent. They are specifically targeting housing, transportation, food, agriculture, and healthcare and energy as well. Those specific industries have a heavy focus for both the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. I think this could be a fantastic opportunity for one to go back and say, hey, remember McCarran Ferguson? Remember when you repealed that act? When do you think you might actually start putting it into policy? When might we actually start to see the advantages of you repealing that? And oh, hey, can we talk about some of these other anti-competitive regulations that have been put in by the insurance industries to not allow doctors to be able to discuss openly and fairly how they are being compensated in their communities. And let's be honest, honestly, the patient is the one that truly benefits from this because as we know, if doctors know what other doctors are charging and want to be competitive in that free trade market, they will start to reduce fees to be competitive. It's just kind of the natural part of what happens or hold fees at a fair and reasonable rate that covers their expenses plus some amount of profit to be able to pay themselves a payroll, not in excess of whatever they feel like they have to charge to cover all their losses on the insurance side. I think there's a huge win for open dialogue. I really hope this takes hold. I really hope individuals will participate in this open comment period. Remember, this is with the DOJ and the FTC, so you have two opportunities to get your voice heard. Deadline is May 26th of 2025. Now, I know you may have seen that there's a lot of activity around two different compacts that are in existence today. In fact, we just showcased a podcast that we did with Bob D, who runs Dentistry in General, another private Facebook group just for dentists, talking about the two different compacts that are currently out there. Now, what's the compact? It's licensure portability. Originally was for the military spouses to allow them to be able to go from state to state without having to reset for licensure exams or jump through the myriad of hoops depending on the state that they were reassigned to. It was to make it easier for spouses to be married to military folks and move around as their deployments and assignments were changed. But it's sort of gotten a life of its own, as these things often do, and to open up the idea that dentists should have more freedom of movement, more like the medical model, where they can easily port their license from state to state. There are two current compacts in existence. One is the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact. That is the one that is backed by the ADA. That is currently being recognized in Nebraska, Arkansas, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, Ohio, Kansas, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin, with 10 other states showing pending legislation to join the compact. There's a second compact called the Dental and Dental Hygiene Licensure Compact, and this is backed by the American Association of Dental Boards. Now, this compact currently has no states participating, but there are about 10 states that are currently looking at this particular compact. Now, the difference between the two is that the dental licensure compact that is being proposed by the American Dental Board has a few more requirements in order to make sure that these individuals moving from state to state are competent, that their transfer of disciplinary actions will happen, and they do mandate some type of hand skills exam, where the dental hygiene compact, the original one backed by the ADA, does not require any of those items. So we do see a bit of this back and forth about what is better for the profession. Bob D, I think, argues that the one backed by the ADA is much more attractive to DSOs because they can move doctors from state to state, especially on states where you might have a office right across state lines without having to go through the arduous task of relicensure. I think there's still a lot of debate here to be had, but clearly the one that is backed by the ADA seems to have the momentum and already has a significant number of states signing on, with many more looking at opportunities to put it into place. So we shall see. Lastly, this one's really interesting, and I don't even know what the takeaway is, so we're just gonna I do know what the takeaway is, and I'll tell you at the end, actually, as I reflect on this. So a dental patient has now filed lawsuit against a team, the dentist, his team of people that were overseeing the care of the patient for a gouged tongue. Now, we don't know the extent. No pictures were posted, which would have been really helpful for those of us that are dental nerds that would love to see this gouged tongue and just how bad was it. But in California, you can get away with a lot more. And there are a lot more laws, we'll just say, that really do work to the advantage of the consumer. So, this individual, Mr. James Jordan, who's 73 at the time of the procedure, filed a lawsuit against the Superior Court in the Superior Court of California, Ventura County, against a clinic, an unnamed doctor, and the unnamed individuals who were helping assistants, I would assume. The charges are as follows: medical battery, elder abuse, patient abandonment, negligent hiring and supervision, and infliction of emotional distress. Now, Mr. Jordan came to the clinic seeking care for a severe jaw pain because of an eroded tooth. There were a bunch of allegations about wait times, etc. Went to have an examination by the doctor. The doctor diagnosed it, presented an option. There's no documentation of informed consent, so the treatment began. Whether there was informed consent or not, we don't know. And then alleged that the dental assistant mishandled a dental instrument and caused injury to the tongue. Now, the interesting thing that California is sort of allowing in some of their laws is this now qualifies as a medical battery that relates to unconsented touching that causes significant harm. So I don't know, like all I'm sitting there as a dentist, I'm putting myself in that situation, go, this really sucks. Like this snowballed out from underneath them. They probably were really genuinely trying to do a service for somebody who was probably in a lot of pain and it did not go well. And now there's like a myriad of regulations that are working in favor of the consumer as opposed to the dentist. I in this case, I just wish Godspeed for the dentist. I really hope that this works itself out because I don't believe the dentist meant harm to the patient. That's just me being totally unbiased. And I think in a highly regulatory state like California, this is the type of lawsuits that you have to be worried about. So Godspeed, Dr. Jane Doe. We're here praying for you. And with that, that's the news. Now, tonight, because I'm alone, I also get the privilege of bringing on our guest, which honestly is kind of a privilege. And I'm just going to bring him up because I want this to be a community event. But I had the fortunate experience of meeting Dr. Burton a few years ago through a mutual friend, Schmetty, Dr. Troy Schmetty, from California. So you probably should have weighed in on this.
Him on the side, like,
yeah, we should know about this gouged tongue. I think he should buyer beware on this one. And we struck up a fantastic conversation actually in the Align booth. And when you meet people who are kind of kindred spirits, a healthy curiosity, a constant pursuit for wanting to be a better version of themselves and also have work that they enjoy on a daily basis, which I think you pick up on people that are like, I'm trying to solve problems in my practice. I'm using technology, or I'm, in this case, inventing things that are going to make my life easier. And it's been a fast friendship since then and super easy. But I'm super excited to welcome a dear friend of mine, Dr. Burton, on the show. He's brought to us tonight by another good friend of the show, Garrison, who we're going to talk about this, but I've been a customer of for a really long time, actually a big fan of many of their matrix systems and other products that they offer. So I was really glad to do this collaboration with them this evening. But you're outside of the Chicago area, right?
Yep. So yeah. I live just west of the city and I practice just south of the city, about 30 miles in Frankfort, Illinois.
How is that commute?
30 minutes, 35 minutes.
That's not terrible.
No, it's great. It's actually it's a nice podcast.
I was just going to ask, besides Dennis in the Know, which I'm sure is like top on your feed.
Number one news.
What are some of the I think dentists genuinely like to hear from other dentists. Like, what are some of the podcasts that you're listening to that fill the time?
Honestly, not dental podcasts very
Same.
often. Yeah. So, I don't know. What I usually do is like my friends will send me links to podcasts. Like they're like, this is a good one. This is a good one. Cause I rely, or my wife will too.
Yeah.
I rely solely on that. So like I'm all over the board, and most of the days I'm traveling, it's definitely just like quiet music in the background, just like
Exactly.
decompressing. I've been listening to myself talk. I've been listening to a handpiece all day. And so it's just, sometimes it's just quiet in the car on the way home too, which is
I
good.
caught myself putting classical on the other day, and I was like,
Ooh.
But it was quiet. Like, it's calm and no one's shouting commercials in your ear.
Yeah.
And it's not, some like, whenever you listen to radio now, you can pretty much pick, like, depending on the genre, you can pretty much pick the next 5 or 8 songs. It's going to be a rinse and repeat over and over again. And so I have actually started listening to more classical, which I didn't even do as a kid. My dad was hardcore rock and roll. My mom loved Motown and the oldies, and soft rock. Like, that wasn't even part of my childhood. And somehow yet I have found myself listening to strings.
I think dentistry's broken you, Jen Bell.
I think it has. I think it has. And I'm envisioning like what it would be like to live at Bridgerton or some beautiful castle where I don't have to, I just have to wear a corset every day. I don't actually have to like get up and do anything.
Oh man.
Is that what it is? I'm just transporting myself into time, space, continuum.
From podcast discussions to that, like in 2.5 minutes. That's why I love the show. It's so
good. You never know where it's going to go.
No, you really don't.
So dialing it back for the few people who are dentists who actually do listen to dental podcasts. God bless them. Tell us just a little bit about yourself, your journey, your style of practice, get kind of a day in the life.
Yeah, no. By the way, thank you for the amazing intro. And it goes both ways. You and I know, like, we chat a fair amount behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so we actually almost missed the start of the show, I think. And then Jen's Chrome crashed. We would have talked for another 30 minutes.
I know.
So we were unregulated by the other 2 police officers that are supposed to be here and doing this stuff. And so no, it was a very organic relationship, and just 2 people finding each other out in the world of dentistry. And that's been one of the most exciting things that has happened to me in the last 5 years is the dental education platform, getting involved in continuing education courses and starting to teach, because it was a lonely profession for a while, right? I was a pretty busy guy taking over a busy practice, and I didn't have a lot of involvement in study clubs, local study clubs. There was a few, but I was busy. I was having kids, and I lived 30 minutes away, and my wife was busy too. And so it was to the office back, and then got involved in this, and then met Schmedding right off the bat through one of the ADA individuals who were nice enough to give me my first try at this at SmileCon in I think it was 2020. Actually, it was Vegas.
Oh
COVID.
Gosh.
Like, I think we stayed at Mandalay Bay, and I looked down at the pool, and it was like Armageddon. It was like almost those shows on Discovery Channel. It's like, what would the world be like if everyone left? Like, it was bizarre, but still a well-attended show, and for the time. And that was my first gig. And I met Troy shortly after that through a contact, and then started to snowball into, people like you. And that's made it a lot of fun and very informative too. And I think that what you guys do every week and every day behind the scenes is great, because our profession is a lonely profession. Like, when you're in your office and, we're taking courses to try to learn and try to understand what to do. But especially in today's age, with how fast things are changing, I feel like there was an era where you could go to a trade show every 5 years and it would probably be much of the same. And now you can almost have trade shows like every 5 months, and something's going to be different, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's really fast paced and intimidating to some respect, but a lot of fun you know,
Don't you find when you're lecturing and you say something that sucks, or like you're like, yeah, I mean, who here loves to do a number 8 incisal facial composite? And then who loves doing it for free the second time? And everybody's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I know that pain. Like it's so validating. You're
it
like,
is.
oh, it's not just that I suck.
Yeah,
Like,
or I had a bad day, or I
yeah,
missed
right. Or
something.
my
It's like
bond just does not physically work.
no,
Like
and
it's
that's the
so
whole reason we're
validating.
there, I think that that's the fun part about the teaching aspect of it, and that was something that I just it kinda came naturally to me was just like, I always hated going to courses where they would just show all their successes, right? Like,
Right?
nonstop success train, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like I mean, I am just shrinking in the back, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Man, I should have not come to this," right? Like, this
I
is
shouldn't have gone to dental school.
yeah, I
Like, yeah,
should have
you
just
should be
stayed on
doing
the
something
farm,
different.
like, it would have been way simple.
Yeah.
Um, and so with me, it was like, but I was at the same time, and this too, as an instructor, like you're kind of afraid to show, like to open up the beans on that, right?
Yeah.
But then you find like very quickly, it's like, no, the reason that I can sit here and be like, this is how I would do it now is because look, here's what I did before,
This didn't
and this is
go.
what went wrong. And so it's a fun thing. It's cool. But
I
yeah,
agree.
I do a bit on that actually about missed occlusion on those interiors.
Absolutely. And then I'm like, how many times do you want to do it for free? I mean, people are like, yeah, nah, I can't. And I said, look, I just did one for free on Tuesday. So it's not like I've
Yeah,
learned. I'm just saying, like, you can be better than me. There's a roadmap. It's not the one I've chosen to take, but there is one that could be better than the one I'm currently living.
do what the doctor says, not what the doctor does. Is that
Exactly.
something?
Those who can't teach.
Yep.
Duh. Duh. It's very obvious.
Great. That's great.
Okay. So as we're talking pain points, I think we all have them. We come across like frustrating moments in dentistry where we either wish we were educated better. Like if I just understood this, I could do it differently, which for me was occlusion for sure. Like I needed a much deeper dive in occlusion because I was running into too many things that I was like, I don't know why it hurts when you chew on it. I can't fundamentally figure it out anymore. But there's also procedurally driven things that we do 1,000 times a day, and you hit walls of frustration that you hit cases where you're like, the technology or the crap that I have in my office didn't help me solve this problem. Like I know how to solve it. It just didn't help me. And I think that's been a big part of your evolution as a doctor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
I graduated with amalgam-based boards. So it was 08 and it was still amalgam-based. And a lot of my instructors, there was a handful that were almost like side hustling rings to us in the clinic to be like, you should practice composites in the posterior because, it's a thing, right?
That's like a guy who was sneaking in Septicaine. And he's like, I got it, like in a fanny pack. I got a few syringes.
I got the good stuff.
And I'm like, yes.
Booyah. So it was to that effect. And they were the first generation Garrison rings, funny enough, like those like metal tines.
Oh, right?
Yeah. And the beans, they call them beans. And so I had an education that was largely around amalgam. And I remember almost all of our like cohort study groups or whatever that we would do in these clinics, it was all focused on whether or not composite restorations were like ethical in the posterior, because at that time it just seemed like a streamlined funnel moneymaker for endodontists, right? Because anytime someone got, and everyone's heard the story, everyone's experienced it. If you're 43 or older, you've heard this, right? And so it was going through a lot of changes, but at the same time, it was happening, And so this is a true story. My senior year of dental school, like the second I graduated, I maxed out a credit card and I took Bob Margis's anterior composite course at Cosmodent and Jason Smithson's posterior composite course. He was just coming out, fabulous dentist from UK, like just so good. Phenomenal. I was like, I've never seen restorations like this. And that was 17 years ago. Gosh, I've been practicing for that long. And so you get thrown onto this and you see like some great technologies on the front end, right? We had a couple of ring systems that kind of solved the whole contact issue, or at least partially. And then what I noticed was that that was great, but then the demand of what we were doing with composites was just like skyrocketing, right? So all of a sudden it was no longer like Gordon Christensen, like, okay, if the walls are, if it's 3 millimeters wide and 3 millimeters deep, you can put composite in there. Otherwise, you
That's
shouldn't,
so true. I'd forgotten all about that.
You
Or,
remember that stuff, right?
you would push the boundary because everybody wanted composite. No one wanted, and the only reason they chose amalgam at that time
Was
was
cost.
because the reimbursement rates were
Yeah.
still better. Everything was downgraded to an amalgam. So you're like, well, it's $40 more for me to do a composite.
Yep.
So, but you would take the Tafelmeyer off and you would just pray.
Yeah.
There was fundamental praying.
Every
will it
time.
be closed or will it be open?
And it was always open on the mandible, always.
Always.
Like always open.
And it was anyway, yeah, always.
You didn't stand a chance. And so the demand of these things was growing so fast. And then there grew these techniques, right? I mean, if you think about the evolution of all that, right? We had Teflon tape, people were designing courses around how to do white fillings on these like major cases. And so, which were phenomenal and it was great. But at the same time, I was just staring at some of these situations and that weren't even that complex or shouldn't have been that complex. And I was running into walls in my office and consistent walls. And I still have every ring I think made ever almost in my office. It has to be close. Maybe not all of them, but
is it going to be like your Blanton's mounted?
You're going to have to like, no, because they are not packed. They are spread out. It's like a shotgun spread all over the office. Like you open a cabinet and the ring will fall out from like, I'm like, oh, that's from 2012.
Yeah.
And so, but the point,
I'm not a nerd.
No,
don't worry.
But I was trying everything, right? I was like, something's got to work. Something's got to work. And I realized that through just constant trial and error that it wasn't necessarily the ring's fault all the time, right? So I was looking at these steps like, okay, matrix band goes in, okay, everything's fine. Then the wedge goes in, and then it's like, then you're starting to pray, right? You're like, okay, is this going to be okay? Yeah. Is it not going to be okay? Like, what's going to happen? So then I knew there was like a wedge component to this engineering situation. And so that's when I came up with the quad wedge is what it's called now. But a wedge that splits. And then I found Garrison because I started my own company because I realized that this was something, right? I'm like, you know what? Like it's something. I don't know what it is, but it helps me in my office. And I do a lot of these. And so
what was the origin of you making all those wedges?
The origin was me with a 12 blade splitting Triodent wave wedges in half. Like
in your dining room, I believe.
Yeah. So my thumb has like so much scar tissue on it from misses. But I would just make like a week's worth, I mean, I was crazy. I would make a week worth of them and I was just doing that for a while. And then I went out on the road and just started to kind of spread the word on this because everyone had ingrained that it was like a certain way. And what I realized was it wasn't, because the wedge actually controls the contact too. That's the bizarre thing. It's like, we think the ring is going to make the contact, but it's actually the wedge has just as much to do with it. And so I was teaching this course at SmileCon. Funny, we're coming back to that. That was my very first course I ever taught. And Tom Garrison was actually in that crowd.
So were you teaching Garrison at the time?
No.
What were you teaching?
I was for myself.
Yeah.
But
you had a ring.
I'm a Palident Triodent user by like many years. Preferred, and I recommended that they use Palident Triodent. Someone asked if they were
with your custom wedge.
Yeah, and they were like, "Are your custom wedges? Are they compatible with Garrison?" And I said, "I don't recommend using Garrison's rings with these." So
did you have a reason at the time? Just you'd use them, and I guess maybe the gen that they were on just wasn't working in your hands?
Yeah, it was Fusion. At that time, Fusion had just been released. And there was like, it was just the pads were too big for
agreed.
That, right. And I was still kind of like a universal guy. And I have Fusion. I bought Fusion. But there was just something about the Palident Triodent thing and I think for me, honestly, I think it was like access. like I just had a different access to it. I was used to
Yep.
using it. There was things that I didn't like about it, but at the same time, I kind of knew how to drive the boat, right?
Yeah.
And so, Tom and I meet up like 3 months later, and we're chit chatting, and because he was like, I didn't know. Again, I didn't even know that he
That
was
he was in there.
no, I had no idea. So
Talk
he's
about pucker
talking,
factor. If you
yeah, he's talking to
don't,
me like, hey, like I've seen your product, I've seen you around at a couple trade shows, like we should talk, let's chit chat. So we start chit chatting, and then we hit it off. And at the end, it was like the Friday at midwinter, and they're giving out the free beer,
right? Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
having a beer, and he looks at me and he's like, I was actually standing at your show at SmileCon in Vegas. And I was like, no kidding.
Mm.
I'm like, you saw that course? He's like, yeah. He's like, really hurt my feelings that you told the audience not to use Garrisons. And I was like, oh, Tom, it'll never happen again. If we
Oh, I
work
thought
this
it was
out, I
safe
promise.
room.
Yeah. I'll reel that back in. So it was kind of a unique relationship from the start because, and that's one of the cool things about Garrison is they're so innovative, right? So they went out and, hooked up with me, and we started figuring things out, but they brought in like someone who wasn't a Garrison user to help them like engineer this next generation of ring. And the goal of this ring was to kind of simplify and streamline things, because there was things that I didn't like about Garrison rings. There was things that I did like about them, and vice versa for the others. And so it was easy for me to walk into these meetings and knowing that they all knew that ahead of time. So it was just a very honest and organic conversation from the beginning of design features and all of these things, where it's like, okay, there's no hard feelings here. We're just after finding a mesh of the very best of what we've learned. And so it's funny, if you look at the quad ring, and there was a video about this because they were like interviewing me for some things when we first started developing this. And I was, in one of my original pitches to them was like, it's kind of a combination of your generation 10 ring, which was the strategy, the most recent one.
Yeah.
And then Gen 1, which was just that straight up and down metal bar. And I'm like, you're taking the best of those two things, fusing them together, and then adding a totally different wedge component to allow the ring and the wedge to work together, which also opens doors to quadrant dentistry simplification and all of these things. And so when I started prototyping this with them, and that's where their engineers are so smart. It's so fun. It was
It's
so
so
fun to work with
fun.
them. Yeah. It was really cool because I would just throw this problem at them and I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to give them a solution. And then like 24 hours later, I'm like, I would have never thought of that. Like,
No.
wow, that's crazy. So we were 3D printing these like prototype pads and they were assembling certain things. I mean, just like with incredible detail of a 3D printed prototype. And I started using these and I was like, holy cow, like this actually works. And so it was nice having that background where like I was this Paodent Triodent user and then coming with them. And so this product kind of has that feel to it where it's like, it's kind of made for both crowds, and everyone benefits, and everyone runs into this problem, right? Where no matter what you have, if it's routine, if it's complex, whatever, it's like that thing that you can just reach for and it's going to deliver, excellence for you in all those different situations.
Well, and I love it's developed by a dentist. Like I a couple of things that you've said have really struck me and I think deserve a little highlight. Number one, it's incredibly rewarding to work with companies who are okay taking chances on people who don't fit their bucket.
Yep.
And who actually challenge their status quo. And I find that with Align, actually, I don't fit their bucket in a lot of ways. And yet they keep re-engaging. And I think it's because they really want to understand the average general doctor out there working really hard and what may be challenges in their system. So I applaud them for that. And I think Garrison is also that type of company to take a chance on somebody who said, look, I'm not in your ecosystem. Like I'm not, if you want somebody who's just going to get up here and glad hand, like it's not going to be me. But I think at the end of the day, the product will be better for kind of pushing the envelope and not just telling you what you want to hear, but like, how's it really working in the trenches?
Yep.
Two, that a doctor finds a problem and then pushes for solutions because only we truly understand. And so many companies create innovations, and I've sat through many meetings where they're like, tell us what you think. And I'm like, I don't know what problem you've just solved for me. I don't actually have this problem. Like, you've just spent an inordinate amount of money, and that's not a problem I even feel like I have.
Yep.
And so maybe you'll find someone who cares, but it's not going to be me. Sorry.
And
Like,
that was dentistry for a while. That's a lot of
yes.
products.
You're like, great. I'm glad you came out with that. I don't know what to do with it. So
Yep.
appreciate it. Or like, there's been amazing things that come out, and then there's other stuff that it either wasn't ready, or actually you could tell had never really been in the hands of anybody who had actually done a dental procedure before. So I love companies working side by side with doctors to come up with solutions, because then at least, succeed or fail, it was scientifically driven, it was clinically driven, like it had gone through all of those necessary steps to make sure that this was going to be a product that had some place in the market and would solve problems for doctors. So I love that Garrison believes in improving clinical outcomes and the experience of doctors, and they're like that perfect size of a company that's innovative but connected.
Yep.
Like grassroots connected, right?
Connected. Yeah, that's a good word. And they are, and they want innovation so bad. And the really interesting thing is, I'll give you guys like a little sneak peek into how, how intense that is that, we're standing there, we're talking about all these things, right? And I threw out this idea at the beginning, and I said, this is the first system, the quad matrix system will be the first system that will allow you to do simultaneous back-to-back restorations consistently. And they looked at me and they're like, oh, that's so cool, but you got to prove it, And so we went through this, and if they were going to make such a bold statement, it went through a ton of testing, like a couple hundred doctors at the beginning, like 2,500 some restorations over a 12-week period. Like almost 1,000 of them, I think, were back-to-backs, maybe 800, but it was like gauntlet. We asked direct questions. We encouraged this type of use of it. We're like, go off trail with it. Like, just throw it in there and go. And when I was testing it too, I remember trying, because I was nervous. I was like, oh, I hope this thing works, right? But I would try to simulate like just less than ideal accesses, right? Which we all run into all the time. But you got to think about what some people are working with, right? Like, not everyone has a headlamp. Not everyone has great vision. Not everyone has a really good assistant that's going to like get them ready, right?
Great
so
point.
I would literally try to place the ring and the setups, and like I would shut my headlamp off, like put the overhead light in there, but at a crappy angle, and then just kind of like almost wing it or close an eye, and try to simulate these difficult environments to place it. And so but we realized that it worked and that it had made it through, and it's a really cool innovation. But they're really connected with that kind of thing, and so they want these innovations, they want to develop these innovations, but they're also like, we're not just going to go out there and just that's a bold statement, right? Like, you have a lot of work to do to get there, and it took a couple of years to get to that point, to engineer all these things and to do it with such precision and accuracy. And so much happens in like 4.5 millimeters.
It's so crazy.
So much. It's crazy.
And different materials.
Yeah.
Like, fine, you have the matrix system, you have, these beautiful wedges and beautiful rings, but you can't control the composite.
Nope.
Right?
So,
and they all have different properties.
Yep. So it's
pros and cons.
It just had to be its own entity. And that's what I was driving for, was like, this thing's just going to set a form. And one of the unique things that we discovered with it, one of the most unique things that I think I discovered with it while we were using it was in the design, but we didn't really foresee it, was that the driver tip, that bar that comes in the middle, it helps orient the ring. It forces the ring into a completely proper orientation with the teeth, right? So before, the rings, when you had two pads, they would come in
and it'd be like,
they would tilt or can't, depending on whatever engaged first, like pretty much whatever one it would do. And that would deform contact areas. And that's why some of those contacts would be, this way or that way. But this driver tip, it has to go right where the gingival embrasure is. It just forces that ring right there. And so it orients the ring, but then it also puts all the force of the ring. And this was the interesting thing, all the force of the ring right there, right in that spot. So you're not losing in those same situations where you had the pads coming in on both sides. You would get these rotations a little bit. And so the ring forces dissipated over the ring kind of flexing and moving around. But the driver tip kind of focused, into one spot. And so it was those fun little realizations where you're like, why are these contacts so tight? Because I think they were looking at it too. Like what was different? And it was that, just that little design feature change.
So let's talk about, okay. I have two topics I want to talk about. One, nickel titanium, pros, cons. I know that's something Garrison's been moving towards with the rings for the memory of that wire.
I think it's a huge pro.
Yeah.
That was one of my things with competitor rings, is that they would fatigue over time. And I mean, I would get these really nice contacts, but after a few weeks, if I was cranking, after a few weeks, I would start to you could even feel like it would just like open up a little looser. And so I would do my best to like only open it up enough, but like, that's not realistic. Like we got to be able to use these things.
Or you have the assistant that pre-opens it for you and sits it out there for an hour.
And you get them and they're like, whoa,
I want to die.
It's probably past the elasticity.
Yeah, it's never coming back now. No. So good job. No. Good job.
Take it in the back and squeeze it with some
exactly.
See if you can get it back. But the nickel titanium has been awesome. I mean, I've had some of these rings that I've kept using were from like phase 1. So gosh,
still cranking.
Yeah. And I'll throw them into circulation. They're still cranking.
That's awesome.
So I have a whole pile of these in my office. I'm like, all right, keep these real clean ones over here for this. And then, but I still use some of those, and it's by accident. Actually, I think my assistants, sometimes they just get into the routine of like putting things, back in bins or whatever. Yep. So, but I'll find one and I marked them a certain way. So I'm like, gosh, this one's like a year old. And it's still functioning that way. So they've done a good job in that
so
respect.
So it was a pretty big realization for me. So you said something earlier, and actually you've kind of opened my eyes yet again. So I was led all through dental school because we were trained about the same time. Wedge, 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 wedge. Wedge was the only thing that was going to make a contact, right?
Yep.
And then I had this, and we really actually didn't have any sectionals in the office or in dental school. I think maybe there was an alleged, Paladin ring somewhere. We had copper rings for giant core buildups, which never have I ever used it since I left dental school. But like the guy rolled out with this little box of copper rings, and I was like, what do you want me to do with this thing? Like,
is that what they use in some DME things? Is that what you're talking about? Is that some DME docs use those things still?
I don't know. Does anyone use it still? It's literally it's an adjustable copper ring, but it was a copper ring. And then you had the ones that were truly adjustable. I don't remember what the name was, but you had that special tool that's stuck in there, and you'd twist it and it would tighten it up. No, nothing. It was some kind of silver band, and it had like this little resin core thing, and you stuck this long tool in it, and you would turn the tool and the tool would tighten it up. Again, for like big ass class 4, class 5.
Which is what we were dealing with in dental school.
It was dental school, right?
Untrained dentists trying to do that stuff, right?
But again, I'm living and dying by a wedge all day. If I can't get the wedge to help me, I'm screwed. So it was a big realization in private practice that the ring was doing as much as it was doing, and that it was as fundamentally important that the ring fit well and that it had its elasticity maintained, because it was contributing to the contact so fundamentally. But you said something earlier that the new system, or maybe as things have evolved over time, it's as much the wedge as the ring. And I would love to dive into that more, because I think fundamental sectional matrix users rely on the ring. They think.
Yeah. And this is where I like geek out, right? So let's
go.
I just totally took a right turn.
But you
And just
don't know this. I'm
dove
going to
into this.
find this thing and I'm going
I
to
have
send you
studied
this
sectional matrix systems in more
twisty
detail.
thing that I had to use.
And so what I discovered quickly was that the wedge can produce X amount of force. Okay. I think it's
Okay.
like, it's measured at like 34 newtons of force
Okay.
is what that can produce. The ring is about the same, but the difference is longevity. So when wedges go in, it's like physics, right? So wedges go in, you're pushing it in with your finger, and then as soon as you let it go, those teeth and the tissues are pushing back on that wedge, okay,
Yep.
the whole time. And so that wedge is gonna, especially with like wooden wedges or sycamore wedges or and plastic too, because it's slippery, but it's gonna want to back out, or it's going to deform based on what those tissues are pushing back onto it. And so as far as force application goes, that's number one. But number two, and this is more important than that, because you could argue, well, how much force you can get from a wedge and separation. It's like in the right situation, you can get a ton, right? Like sometimes you don't need a ring, but those times aren't that often. Is that when you start to wedge that hard, if you don't have a preparation, if you're looking at two teeth coming together and my nose is the gingiva, right? And if you have box here and box levels here where you have room for your wedge to sit where my nose is, you're great. You can push it as hard as you want. One of them drops down here and then you start wedging, then the harder you push, it's just pushing your matrix band in. And so I was figuring out that, well, the harder I push this wedge in, then, and here's a perfect example, Jen. So you've been in this situation where like you have a pretty deep molar box, but it still looks like you're like, all right, we got this. And your hygienist is like, I'm ready for a check. You're like, great, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You put your matrix band in and then you wedge and then you look, right? You look down and your contact is wide open, right? You're like, well, the ring's going to fix that. So then you put the ring on it and then you restore and then you take it off and you're waiting for that moment where you pop the matrix band free and it just like, comes right out.
When you take the ring off and the sectional comes with it,
yeah,
you're
you're like, you see it like,
you're like,
you're like, no, I didn't get it.
Yeah,
and that was a perfect example of where like the wedge was pushing, it's actually deforming the contact area. And so then I took it a step further. So that was kind of my thing for a little while. And I'm like, it's doing that. And then what I really started to realize was that something that we ignore completely is contour of these restorations interproximally. And by completely, I mean, we rely on our sectional matrix bands to form this for us. Okay. So we say, okay, I have a pre-contoured matrix band. I'm going to put that thing in there. That means my filling is going to be curved just like the metal band, but these metal bands are made out of stainless steel.
Yeah.
And they're moldable. They're bendable. So the second you start putting forces on these things, they are going to change shape. And so we have to be aware of what kind of forces we're putting on these things and where we're putting these forces on these things, because whatever shape our matrix band is, that's our filling. It's not like the amalgam days where you could pack that thing to success, right? I mean, you could push and make it yours. But with this, it's not the case. And so then I started to realize, okay, contour is king to getting a contact area. And if you really focus on contour, then you will get a contact. And so I started doing that like in anterior work and all, different areas. And then it kind of clicked like, okay, if we have a wedge that will allow for a proper contour and a ring that will work with the wedge and not disrupt our sectional matrix system, then we probably have something that could be a pretty consistent winner. And that's where this thing was born, was just, wedging has had its, its differences and its ups and downs. And back in our day, that's all we had, right? When we first started, it was like you wedge. Sometimes I would wedge and hold it in with my finger, and like my ring was the finger, or my finger was the ring, right?
Exactly.
Like, and there's times that I still do that, where it's just like there's chaos going on. I'm like, I'm not putting a ring in there. And we make it happen. But with all things considered and the demand on what we have to do now, it's like it was time to find a little bit of a different and better way to do it.
So you remind me of a story, wedge being king in dental school. I don't know how your dental school is structured, but we had cubicles, like you'd be assigned to an op for the day, or for that patient or whatever. But they're all open above
Yeah.
6 feet, 5 feet, whatever that was. So you could kind of stand up and look out over whatever. So a good friend of mine, and I will clip this and actually put it as a reel because I want him to remember this vividly, because he watches the show. So he believed in the wedge. Like he believed fundamentally in the physics of the wedge. And we all were entrenched in the concept that you have to like really shove that wedge in to get that contact. And so all of a sudden I hear, ah! Like screams from his operatory. He had clocked a 90-year-old woman in the face from pushing so hard on the wedge to get that contact that he like slipped and it just went and clocked her right across the chin and she screamed out. And I thought, as you were telling the story, I was like, no, we lived and died by that wedge. Like it was so entrenched. He beat an elderly woman to get that contact. But I guarantee you, to this day, if it's still in, and since we were dental students, it may not be, but let's just hypothetically say no pork, no chicken is getting stuck in there. Yes. None. Not one.
Nothing's getting stuck in there.
Nothing.
No, you can't even floss that thing.
But anyway, it's fine. All those things are really good. When you were in dental school, did you think that you would be so obsessed with class 2s? Because I think most of us hate them.
No. So. Yeah, I think that what drove me to it, and it's kind of funny. Like I was thinking about this the other day too, because everyone's hearing the word recession, right?
Yeah,
like, it's going to happen. Well, of course it's going to happen eventually. Like it's the way it goes. But I bought my practice in a recession, and it was, but I didn't care. I was getting out of dental school. I had $17 in my checking account. I'm like, whatever. What do I got to lose? Right? Let's go. And
literally only $17. Yeah, that's all I have to lose.
I went to one ATM and it was like, sorry, bud. You can't, like, we only offer 20. So I was like, oh, that's when I knew my wife was a keeper.
Yeah. Right.
At the time, she helped me out.
Yeah.
And so, but I bought it in a recession and you don't know, I wasn't paying attention then. I was just trying to make things work. I was trying to get better and trying to manage staff for the first time. And, there's a lot of trying at the beginning.
Yeah.
And, but I look back at what I was doing and a lot of what I was doing was direct restorative, right? Like a lot.
Absolutely.
And so it's just one of those fundamental things where it's kind of funny where if you look at your office and you're thinking like recession resiliency, and it's like, it's just to be recession resilient. I don't believe in proof because there's no such thing really.
Nope.
But to be resilient, you have to be fundamentally involved with dentistry, and direct composites are it, people are always going to have cavities. They're always going to break teeth. How they fix those teeth and whether they fix the other 5 next to them, that's going to come and go.
Yeah.
But, those types of things were always there. And so my early dental career was learning by fire and jumping on like Dental Town when it was a baby and, learning from like John Kanka's Apex Solutions forum because he had the least sensitive bonding agent at the time. And I was like, well, I'm really dumb and inexperienced. So I need like something that's like basically dummy proof. So I used that for a while and you're just learning from all these people, but it was a ton of directs. And that's where I got so involved in it. And then I started to build confidence. And then that's when I started to realize these run-ins. And then as I was gaining speed in other areas, then I was like, well, I can do a crown prep faster than I can do this. And I'm like, that's a problem. And so then I started to rethink things a little bit. And that's where we are today.
If doctors are curious, like I'm sure there are plenty of people who watch the show who are like, yeah, I have a pain point and I've been thinking about ways to solve it. Is there any advice other than, cutting their thumb every Sunday to get ready for the work week, making wedges? And not that you don't have to put the sweat equity in. Like, here's a funny story. So Chad and I were lecturing at Howard Glazer's event a couple weeks ago. And, he invented the Optra pad I think an Optra Sculpt. which is the Ivoclar has that instrument that has these
Yeah. That thing,
he invented that.
the white pad thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a dentist, obviously. And I was like, "Wow, how'd you come up with it?" Just like inquisitive. And again, pain point. I got annoyed, blah, 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 blah. Why can't we use this? Blah, 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 blah. And so eventually he sold the right or, patented it through Avoclar because you
Mhm.
need a manufacturer, somebody who can make the material science, chemical science that can engineer and do the
Sure.
things you want to do. Like, it may be too soon in your journey, but any advice or any thoughts about young budding engineers out there who are trying to solve problems clinically for themselves?
If you're trying to do that, you're in the right profession.
Yeah.
What I would say at this point. I think that I think dentistry's it's kind of what it is and how it's be careful how I say this. What it actually is versus how it's kind of
Become?
demonstrated to us in dental school
Yeah. Yep.
is so different and disconnected. And I think that part of that is that what you have to be is completely and constantly evolving
Yeah.
every day as a practitioner. And in your early days, take bite wings of restorations to check your techniques. I did that for a couple of years when I was trying new materials or whatever. Like, don't wait 6 months to find out if what you've been doing for 6 months is not working.
Right.
So if you're making changes, which is great, you should, and grab new innovative products and find those things. Then just check yourself. But if you're thinking about that in that way, then you're in the right profession. Now, getting into the whole product development thing, it's quite a journey. It is not easy. It is thousands of hours of work, and all you
Money.
see on Shark Tank is the last 40 seconds of its life
Right.
before it gets shot to the moon. And so there's a lot that goes into it. But one thing I would say for pain points is find companies, find products that are solutions for things. Don't be afraid of innovation. I was kind of taught in dental school to be leery of innovation, because tried and true, Kerr impression material will always do it. And you had to peel me off that when I got my iTero. Like, I was like, I don't know if this thing is actually going to do it right. How can it be so
Yeah.
good? But it was, and I've never looked back. So there's these innovations that are out there, and you have to arm yourself with things that are made to make you better and enhance what you do, and take your focus off of this wide of a bandwidth of what could go wrong and narrow it down to an area that's like this big. And then all of a sudden the minor details just start to fall in place. You start to waste less time. You're way more efficient,
Mhm.
you're more confident. Everything looks a little bit better. And then you start to, you use these tools to let you get better and grow, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. I tell patients when they're like, that was easy, I was like, you realize 150 things could have gone wrong in the last 30 minutes. Like,
And I've got a bazillion dollars and so much education in this moment to be able to sit here and do
yes,
this in 5
to
minutes.
hear you say that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
In 5 minutes. Frankly, I'm impressed myself.
Yeah,
I'm going to get a
usually
cocktail
we're
now.
more
I have to
impressed,
go.
and sometimes I say that, I'm like, wow, that went really well. Like, that was good.
Yeah,
And they're
I
like, you
usually
didn't think
tell
it
them, I'm
was?
like,
Like,
I should
no.
just go home now.
Yeah,
Just stop.
let's call it
Ended at a win.
early lunch.
Last question. Will we be solving the class 3 dilemma anytime soon?
Maybe.
Mm, I suspected as much.
It comes after 2,
It
so
does come after 2, but
moving up
before
the ladder.
4. Yeah, yeah. I would love that. I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
You know what I use for
I
those? M200 matrix bands, Garrison's M200s. Those,
I use them,
yeah, I use those too. That's what I use for those, and
but they're
just stand
still
'em on there.
challenging, like a lot.
They're challenging.
They're
Yeah.
really challenging.
They're more challenging than they should be.
Agreed. But Mylars is kind of like, well, Mylar sucks. This kind of sucks. Like, which suck do I want to currently participate
Or
in?
do you just watch it?
No comment.
I'm just kidding. We had used Mylars on the board. Like, that was
Oh, I
so
know.
It was rough.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. Oh, I only had a Toffelmeyer on boards.
Yeah. It was roulette. Like board day was roulette. It was like,
Oh.
I don't know what's going to
And
happen.
we had patients going back who get checked and then come back and say, well, it's $250 to fill it. You're like, huh. Well, $250 it is then, because like they were talking back there. They were like, you know, one patient would see another patient and be like, how much are you getting paid to be here? And they're like, $500. And he's like, oh, I'm only being paid 200. They're like, oh, And then they come back and be like, you can fill it, but it's going to be $200. And you're like, damn it. Like, they should not be allowed to talk back
and
there.
You know who it was. You know who it was that was paying $5. You know who it was.
Of course I know who it was. Anyway, I'm just glad those days are over. Maybe we can go into the compact discussion about licensure portability and Godspeed for all those individuals.
I'm just hoping you don't have to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act anymore.
If I talk about it one more time, I'm going to literally poke my eyes out.
Oh my gosh. I thought you took a vacation for like a month and just like pipe the same
same stuff.
newsfeed over.
Change the shirt though. I did change the shirt. Yes. Sometimes I change the hair, but it's not very often. It's so painful. The government is so painful to track. Like, we'll all comment about all the terrible things that insurance companies do to make us anti-competitive. And the fact that boards don't let us thank patients for giving it. Like in my state, if I have a patient who sent me like 15 patients, just literally just goes on their Facebook neighborhood page and they're like, oh, I love Dr. Bell. She's so great, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, man, that is so nice. I'd like to send you a $20 Starbucks gift card. I just really appreciate you being so kind. That? I cannot do that.
Wow.
I cannot do normal business things.
It's wild.
I know. But I'm going to send all this stuff to the government. They're like, oh, that sucks.
Keep me posted.
Yeah.
You will.
Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
Maybe you should send a recording more than like writing. You do better recording, I think, than writing. So just send just video.
Yeah, I'm just going to start sending messages to everybody.
Yeah.
Video messages to Trump. Let's get it together.
What you need to do. Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Let me lay it out for you. RFK. Let me lay it out. Let's talk about fluoride. You know. Also, every dentist that's involved in ADA and AGD and a bunch of other organizations are on Capitol Hill right now fighting for the things that I think we care about. So that's kind of cool to see them up in action. Again, I just think they're so distracted right now. I don't know how much any of our information is actually falling on listening ears.
Yep.
But, time will tell.
Well, dentistry is a wild ride, I will say. As a profession, a lot of things have changed in the last 5 years, and I'm interested to see where the next 5 take us. I can't say it's not entertaining, at the very least.
At the very minimum.
Yeah.
At the very minimum, it is entertaining.
Very.
There's always a story that comes into your office, and you're like, huh. Did not see that one on my bingo card for today.
I've started a new saying in my office where it's like, the second I think that I've seen it all, I show up to work one more day.
Yep.
And it's like in 17 years, I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
And in 1 week, almost every week, I'm like, what is this? Whether it's like a personality or a tooth thing or like a growth or like some sort of tongue biting accident during lunch pizza. It's like, what is happening?
What is happening?
I don't know.
That'll be another episode for another day.
It will be.
Matt, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for
I want you back on a million times. Obviously, we need to do a webinar on amazing class 2s because now we're offering webinar series. We pay for those. We pay for those. These are, not, but we pay for those. So you should definitely consent to that.
I will publicly consent to, yes, I accept your invitation.
Yes. Sure. We're getting a great lineup of people actually coming online. So it's really fun. Nice. But it's so amazing. Honestly, I pinch myself many days because when the guys who currently are not present doing the thing that they asked me to come do 4 years ago, and now they abandoned me like this. I had no idea the amazing, cool people that were gonna be waiting in my path that I was gonna run into and meet from all over the world, but, particularly in our sphere, and, I continue to be humbled and enthusiastic and rejuvenated to show up and do dentistry another day because, there's amazing people out there trying to make it better, so
Ditto.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks. We're wrapping it up for another fantastic episode. If you hate class twos, no more. No more. Garrison has the solutions for you. We're going to have an amazing dinky deal for you tomorrow. We're going to post that on our site so that you too can experience the joy of the quad matrix system. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jen.